Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, thank you very much for joining us for our first session on Where to From Now, a cyber strategy update. I'm delighted to be here for this 10th anniversary of the Munich Cybersecurity Conference, and let me echo previous speakers in congratulating the organizers on such a fantastic lineup of thought leaders to discuss some of today's most pressing digital security issues. I am Arthur Liedekerke, and I'll be moderating the panel today. I have the honor of chairing a session where we will be able to reflect back on some of the more significant incidents and trends that we have observed over past months, and importantly, look into steps that are being taken by businesses and governments alike to address this increasingly complex cyber threat environment and the accelerating pace of change. Now, I've left a bit of time out at the end of the session so we can have questions from the audience, so please save them or prepare them for that moment. But without further ado, I will call on my fellow panelists, or my panelists, that I will introduce one by one. Could I please have Matt Collins join me first? Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, sure, thanks. Thank you. So Matt Collins is Deputy National Security Advisor and the UK Prime Minister's Advisor on National Resilience and Security in the Cabinet Office. Matt has been in the UK Civil Service for 17 years, including director-level roles in intelligence, technology and security within the National Security Unit in the Cabinet Office. I have Florent Kirchner. Florent is the head of the French cybersecurity strategy within the Prime Minister's services and is tasked with planning and coordinating investments and nationwide in connection with European initiatives. In practice, this means that funding, research, innovation, operations, incubators, and training fall under your purview with the aim to build a better and more trustworthy digital future. I have Sami Khoury as well. Sami. Sami is the head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. The Cyber Centre is Canada's operational authority on cybersecurity, and your career spans over 3 decades with influential roles at the Communication Security Establishment, which is Canada's cryptologic agency. Katherine Getao. Katherine, you have a mixed 39-year information and communication technology career spanning private sector, academia, public sector, and international policy development in Kenya. You enjoy innovatively addressing development challenges, and you've led the design of one-stop-shop public service delivery centers and wide-ranging cyber hygiene awareness campaigns. I have Nicola Hudson. Nicola joined Brunswick as a partner in the cyber practice in 2022. She has worked on hundreds of cybersecurity incidents and has deep expertise in cybersecurity issues. Prior to Brunswick, you were a member of the executive board at GCHQ and director of policy at the National Cybersecurity Centre. And prior to this, you were the head of the UK Prime Minister's Office, managing day-to-day business during a period of 2 referendum and 2 general elections. And I have Jake Braun. Jake serves as the acting principal deputy national cyber director at the White House. In this role, he works closely with US government partners and the international community, academia, and the private sector to shape and coordinate federal cybersecurity policy. You've previously held senior positions across sectors, including as the senior counselor for transformation to the Secretary of Homeland Security and CEO of Cambridge Global Advisors, as well as executive director of the Cyber Policy Institute at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. So Jake, let's start with you. We've just heard from the previous session about a certain threat actor, Fault Typhoon to name him, and the real risks that presents for critical infrastructure in the US. Now, I wonder, since our session is focusing on strategy, if you could enlighten us as to how the Biden administration's national cybersecurity strategy deals with those types of threats, and I'll press you for specifics, maybe a little more.
Sure. So first of all, thanks, Arthur, for moderating the panel, and thanks to my fellow panelists for sharing your thoughts today. And also, I want to thank MCSC for really all the great work they've done over the years in strengthening the transatlantic relationship and improving our dialogue around cyber. But to answer your question, so we should be clear about kind of what these attacks were. I think Anne said this earlier. These are really about pre-positioning on our critical infrastructure in a way that would slow military mobilization in the event of conflict. And really the only reason that an entity would do this is for disruptive or destructive purposes. So there's no other reason why they're taking these actions than disruption or destruction. But the good news is that the Biden administration and the president himself really does have kind of a bold vision for an affirmative policy in cyberspace as opposed to these threat actors. And the strategy is quite threat agnostic. And so let me just go through a couple overarching things and we can get into more details as you suggested. So two kind of key pieces of this is one, we really look to shift the burden from individuals, where most of the burden in cyber is today, to the big tech companies and others that can actually shoulder this burden and put the time and resources in needed to make our technology secure by design and secure at the outset. And then secondly, we're looking, as everybody in this room knows and has known for years, we need to incentivize long-term investments in cybersecurity. We've all been saying that for a while, but we've now instantiated that in the strategy. And then a third piece that I think is particularly relevant for this group is, we know that the United States is not an island. We are only as secure as our allies are as well. And so we put a significant amount of time and energy in the strategy into helping with capacity building for allies who are trying to protect themselves from these same kind of threats. And so I'll pause there.
This last point on the US not being an island, US cybersecurity agencies last week put out an advisory about Volt Typhoon specifically, and in partnership with, I believe, agencies within the UK and Canadian government. Can you maybe speak a bit more as to how international coordination on these matters is addressed in the strategy?
Sure. So as you may have seen, while our new director of the Office of the National Cyber Director, Harry Coker, was speaking in Congress, that's exactly when this product was released. And specifically, that product calls for secure by design measures to be taken, not just by industry, but by all who are affected by this, and really calls out some specifics as it relates to implementing secure by design. But let me go through a few other key components of our strategy that I think are particularly relevant for this and relevant for how we would deal with these type of threat actors and specifically these type of attacks in the future. So as we like to say in my office, strategies are nice from Washington, but strategies with resources are a lot better. And so President Biden, in working to pass the bipartisan infrastructure law, did just that, provided resources to state and local governments and our critical infrastructure partners to implement a lot of these policies. So specifically, about $19 billion was passed in a fund for resilience, which can be spent on things like cybersecurity, and then another $1 billion for state and local governments to implement and craft their own cyber strategies. So that $20 billion collectively of the two programs, we think is critical to ensure that state and local governments and the critical infrastructure that is within those states has the resources they need to implement strategies like the one that we put out. So that's thing one. So first off, you got to resource your strategy. Secondly, financial resources are one piece, but human resources are another. And so our office specifically has taken on, we have a whole team who works on trying to deal with the 500,000 estimated cyber vacancies in the United States. And we've tried to do a whole host of innovative things. So for example, we're trying to get our own house in order. We recently announced that we are, where appropriate, removing the advanced degree requirements for contractors to perform on U.S. federal cyber contracts. Secondly, we're doing a whole host of things for free or low-cost certification or community college programs to help those who never wanted to get an advanced degree but could perform quite well in the cyber industry into the industry. And then two other pieces specifically for our foreign allies. One is the FBI is working to train a whole cadre of folks to be able to respond to incidents, and the State Department has now done dozens of engagements with allies to build capacity and so on for folks trying to up their game against these types of adversaries. So I'll pause there and let the...
That's very helpful. Thanks. Jake. I wonder if I could turn to you now, Katherine, for well, your take on what the preparedness of Kenya, and if you want to speak more broadly about the context in Africa, to deal with some of the threats that we've just heard about from Jake.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon, colleagues from around the world. Well, there's good news, and as usual, not so good news. The good news is cybersecurity is really on the map for most African governments, including Kenya. Technology, especially in Kenya, is pervasive, and we have seen critical infrastructure issues that have literally brought the country to a standstill. Because a lot of our financial operations, increasingly e-government, they happen online, and therefore it can really hit us. So governments have taken note. I don't know if people noticed that the Malabo Convention of the African Union was passed last year after being in the sidelines for 11 years since it was drafted, and this shows that African governments are taking issues of cybercrime, data privacy, and so on much more seriously, especially since COVID, because one of the positive impacts of COVID was that business continued online, and this helped governments appreciate its importance. There's a lot of public awareness. People have personally experienced cyber issues, and therefore they're also raising the issue with the government because of the inconvenience it brings them. The cons, infrastructure, and especially the way that infrastructure is financed, means that we are turning to one geography for our infrastructure, and I'm sure you appreciate that that raises certain types of risk or exposure. Capacity building. We don't have enough cybersecurity professionals, just like everyone else, and there's brain drain from the public sector to the private sector, but also to other parts of the world. It's usually to those who have shall more be given. Privacy and data security, we have a lot of naive users, and therefore, and they're downloading apps from around the world. They answer yes, yes, yes to all the app permissions, and I think last night to a few of you, I gave you some examples of some of the things that happen. So we are subject to the same risks. It is a technology that has a lot of potential for the African continent. We have really taken it to our hearts, and we have real and localized applications that are affecting people right down to the grassroots and transforming their lives for the better. But it also means that we are very, very exposed, and we're happy with the positive developments, but there's a lot we can learn and a lot we can improve.
That's a very helpful overview, Katherine. I wonder, just very briefly, I'm also mindful of the red and yellow and green cards. If we could just get your what's on your radar in terms of threats. We mentioned some of them in our preliminary call, but I wonder, what's top of your radar?
Okay, it's more than the top. And I think we need to extend the definition of cybersecurity to include all aspects of security. So I believe that especially with AI and the emerging technologies, we're going to move beyond the traditional cyber risks to do with cybersecurity to issues of human security, political, economic, social. Examples, of course, political is all the information manipulation leading to election challenges and so on. economic jobs. It's amazing how much Africans invest in the education of their children. And right now, I think there are going to be job threats which affect not only the poorest, but also the emerging middle classes. I myself have used some of the OpenAI models instead of employing a young lawyer to do my work, so I'm equally guilty. But there's also an emerging challenge. I think Africa is a data shadow area. We only provide maybe around 5% of the information. So the training of all these AI models, and I spent part of this morning arguing with one of them, the data from Africa just isn't there. And then, you know, they learn from each other, which the AI model confessed. So it means that we are doubly excluded. And finally, of course, the issue of the digital divide has not disappeared. And therefore, this not only excludes people, but it also creates the risk of increasing number of naive users, because there are also people who, as they become more affluent, they are exposed to this area, and it's a new area for them.
Thanks, Katherine. I saw a lot of head nodding when you mentioned the brain drain, cybersecurity skills gap. So feel free, of course, in your remarks to react to what some of the other speakers have brought up. But Matt, I turn to you now because you know, we're a few mere days away from the grim milestone of the 2-year invasion of Russia's all-out war against Ukraine. And of course, I believe, you know, this has significantly altered the threat landscape, and I imagine also led to some adjustments in your strategy and your approach in responding to some of the incidents and threats that have come out of this. So I wonder if you could maybe elaborate on that.
Yes, of course. Firstly, fantastic to be here. Fantastic to see so many colleagues. So you say 2 years almost. In the UK, we published our cyber strategy just a few months before that, and that really laid the groundwork for some of the partnerships that we've been looking to put in place, particularly between government, the private sector and academia. We've looked to really fast-track some of that partnership work on the back of the Ukraine crisis. So as well as the fantastic work that the National Cybersecurity Centre does in the United Kingdom with industry, we have established a National Cyber Advisory Board co-chaired between our Deputy Prime Minister and Sharon Barber from Lloyd's Banking Group, looking at skills, looking at ransomware, looking at supply chains. And just last week, the Deputy Prime Minister announced a new initiative really looking to maximise the growth that we can see through cybersecurity, rather than just seeing cybersecurity through a security lens. However, what we saw in February of 2022 just really brings to bear that we cannot rest on our laurels. We saw fantastic partnerships between government and industry, and really illustrated the importance of having load-bearing relationships in place ahead of a crisis, making sure that we had real-time access to information, and also highlighted the importance of where you store your data and having a data evacuation plan. The thing that I worry about, though, is that we operationalized all of that then, but we haven't necessarily really learned those lessons. And I worry that we wait and wait and wait until it is too late. The Vice President talked about 2024 being the year of the election. We too have an election in the United Kingdom. And the importance of having those load-bearing relationships, the importance of real-time data, will only be heightened. And I worry that we're still going too slow, and you know, we're waiting for something that is going to really bite us quite hard in the backside before we act.
Certainly an area where the UK seems to be acting fast and decisively is AI and your ambitions in this domain. We've seen the AI Safety Summit happen in the UK. We've seen significant funding allocated to this area. Could you maybe, tell the audience a little bit more about what the UK has in terms of your plans for, this technology, the risks, the opportunities that you see coming along with it?
Well, I think the attention that has been placed on AI over the course of the last 12 months just enables us to bring greater focus to putting in place cybersecurity measures. We have first and foremost looked to do that, really articulate what the risks are from AI to cybersecurity, and then put out practical guidance to help people adjust. But in truth, what we're seeing from AI is only an acceleration, an enhancement, an augmentation of risks that already existed. And so it just goes to my previous point that we need to move more quickly and in a more sophisticated and comprehensive fashion. We've also been very much focused on ensuring the cybersecurity of AI. And MCSC with CISA pushed out an advisory in conjunction with our AI summit to make sure that we're really focused on the secure by design principles that others have touched on when foundational models are developing, what can be fantastic, world-changing bits of technology, but if we don't do that in a secure way, again, we're going to be having to run to catch up. So that was our focus in 2023. 2024 is just to take all of that to the next level. We're looking forward to the South Koreans co-hosting the next AI summit, and we'll look to, and then our French colleagues after that, and we'll just look to make sure that we are keeping pace from a government perspective, from a partnerships perspective, with what is being developed in the private sector.
Thanks, man. I turn to the French colleague now. As you have the honor or the burden, I don't know, of being the only representative of an EU member state on my panel. So I'd like to pick your brains on what France and maybe what the EU has got in store for us in terms of how it's expanding, reinforcing its legislative capability, legal arsenal to deal with some of the threats that have been mentioned. Florent.
Thank you very much. Before anything, again, I want to join previous speakers to thank the organizers here and thank you, all of you, for being a part of this conversation. So let me start with France, and then I can make a link with what we're trying to do at European level and what in particular is being put in place in Bucharest in the ECCC. So first at French level, and I think this is proper to pretty much every national strategy that we've heard this morning, that I expect we're going to be continuing to discuss throughout those 2 days. The first general idea and the drive that we're having is we want, first of all, to make sure that we have the ability to set our own objectives, to identify the actions we need to carry, and then to get the means to carry them out in cyberspace. And this is the definition of strategic autonomy, and this is something that we see all of the member, or at least aligned members of the international community strive to put together. And the way that we do this at French level is we try to contribute on various axes. There's too many of them to list here, but I want to set out 3 main categories for you as examples. The first one is, in order to be able to make those decisions in cyberspace, we need to build a better understanding, a better control of this very specific, very ethereal, very virtual object that is cyberspace. And I don't need to convince any of you in this room, but getting a good idea and a good feel for the complexity of digital systems is something that is hardly overstated, rarely overstated. This is something that's very difficult. Digital systems are, I believe, the most complex systems ever built by men, and they're being built every day, pretty much, and modified every day. And so we often underestimate this complexity, which compounded with the current threat level and the threat actors makes it very important for the French national strategy, but I believe many other strategies, to be able to build this understanding of what is going on, both in the medium of cyberspace and also in terms of the adversarial activities. And to do this, we're focusing, in France in particular, calling the overall, the entire ecosystem, but more specifically academia, to work on 10 specific projects, programs that we know are key in order to move forward this understanding. These range from how you protect data to all the way down to how you supervise systems, and the place in particular of AI in the overall space. But the idea is that we called for people, for volunteers to work on these topics, and we had hundreds of scientists, raise up to the challenge and contribute to better knowledge, better understanding, better mastery of those systems. And this is still ongoing. We're starting the second year of involvement of the ecosystem, but already we're seeing massive results being produced by this overall call for goodwill on the overall ecosystem. The second area that I want to highlight is building capacity. And it's very good to build knowledge, it's very useful, and you cannot go without building knowledge, but you also need to build concrete capacities. And here I just want to highlight two things that we've done in the French national strategy. The first one is, in keeping with this idea that we need to understand better what are those systems and what's critical there, we've done a lot of work in identifying what are critical technologies in those digital systems. And this can range, as you can imagine, on a number of topics. But in particular, maybe the last call that we had last summer was, it's critical to build technology that allows us to build trust in systems, to better evaluate systems, especially when we're strengthening regulation across the world. The ability to better evaluate a digital object and to build trust in this object, to establish trust in this object is critical. And so this is one of the examples of where we're thinking about critical systems. The second example here is we're building cyber campuses across France to better federate the overall ecosystem, make sure that we break down boundaries that may exist, at least they exist in France and they may exist in other countries, between industry, academia, large groups, SMEs, startups, etc. The third item I want to highlight very quickly is the ability to put those capacities that we're building in use to help the entities that are smaller, that are striving and struggling to put together better security measures. That includes local government. We've had a bit of discussions on this previously. That includes the health sector, which is largely impacted by this. And so deploying means to be able to help those sectors with capacity building and capacity deployment is really critical. And I'm very happy to report that when we do this, you get thousands of entities, smaller entities that are being helped, and the deployment is about more than 90% European solutions being chosen to be deployed on those entities. And so here you see the strength of working together. Few things on the
very quickly.
European level.
Yeah.
Very quickly, the idea is the ECCC and the European Center on Cybersecurity has been established since 2022, if memory serves. We're scaling it up, and I have the privilege of being the French representative to the governing board in Bucharest. We're scaling it up, and there's a lot of challenges to tackle with at European level, at European scale, that we need to address, not only at national levels, those ideas of building better knowledge, better capacity, better deployment, building better skills. I think this is something, and I know this is something that we can only address as Europeans to be successful. And so this is where the center not only will be key, but is already key in many aspects.
Thank you, Florent. And I encourage you to ask more questions about EU initiatives if you want to have some more details on that. Nicola, we've had the pleasure of hearing from your co-panelists, mainly from a government or public sector perspective. I'd love to, hear you and bring your private sector industry perspective to bear on some of the challenges in terms of preparation, the impact of incidents on businesses, and how you're equipped or looking to deal with those.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be here. I was reflecting, actually, just 7 years ago yesterday was the opening of the National Cybersecurity Centre in London, which was a first. The first time a nation had kind of brought together intelligence and business and put together a organisation that was built to collaborate and to help businesses as well as the government manage cybersecurity. And one of the first incidents we had was WannaCry, which has already been mentioned, but feels a lifetime ago. And since then, we've had the 2022 cybersecurity strategy. And just recently, Matt was talking about the review of the cybersecurity and economic growth that was launched a week or so ago. And I think it points to the fact that there's a recognition that we all need to do more to improve cyber resilience. And that really rests with business as well as government. And having been on the inside of government, and Anne talked about the ransomware group that I was part of, all of these things that as policymakers and working with industry, you're putting your heads together and how can we improve it? How can we improve resilience? And then on the other side, when you're dealing with business and you see some of the impediments that make it really, really hard for business. Some of the things I've observed in the last few years of working alongside business is the continued cost. It's complex, legacy systems. The skills cap has been talked about a lot, but it is very, very real. There's always vacancies, and quite often at quite senior levels in industries and businesses that you just don't want those gaps in. There is collaboration, but collaboration tends to be sector specific. And so there are some business sectors, the financial sector collaborates brilliantly and is seen as, at the pinnacle of how you prepare for cyber. But where are those learnings for some of the other business sectors that actually could learn from them? There doesn't seem to be much cross-fertilization there. There continues to be a huge amount of secrecy, which doesn't help that information transfer and learning. The number of times when I'm called in to advise an organization who've been hit and the CEOs there like, is there anybody I can talk to who's been through this, who can tell me what's ahead in the next 2 days, 3 days? And I don't say it, and I was like, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years possibly, but yes, let me put you in touch with somebody because there is still so much secrecy. And we've heard a lot about what governments do, in particular to help CNI, which is absolutely, of most importance. But that does leave a huge number of businesses feeling slightly don't know what they're doing and don't know how to prepare and don't know what good looks like and don't know how to connect into the government systems and structures. For businesses who find out it's a state actor on their system, who do they contact? Do they go to? Which regulator, which agency, which police? Even the language we use, we're all quite used to talking about state actors, talking about, it's Klopp or whatever. You talk to a businessman who is working in a commercial environment for the last 30 years, or a businesswoman, and these are criminal groups that they've never come across. And the emotion of somebody in your house, it feels, doing this to them against their will and not being able to control it is absolutely just, it floors them. And so one of the things that I think businesses have to be better at, and I'm not in favor of regulation like a lot of people, but you know, businesses don't prepare enough for the organisational consequences of being hit. They will prepare, particularly on the tech side, you know, how are we going to contain and recover? But the questions that join up across the board are not made. So what is going to happen if my system is down for a day, a week, 3 weeks? How are we going to communicate? Who are we going to communicate with? Do we have a ransom policy? Do we have insurance? Who are we going to call in? Some of these questions are only asked for the first time right in the middle of an incident, and that is really not the time to be asking them.
Thanks very much, Nicola. I'm really keen to keep 5 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. So, Sami, I'll turn to you. I believe Canada is about to hit or will hit the refresh button on your cybersecurity strategy. And maybe in reference to what Nicola was alluding to, how will public-private cooperation be addressed as a part of that?
Thanks, and great to be here, my first time at this conference, and surrounded by great colleagues. I'm the odd person out because I lead an operational area within the federal government. We are the operational national cybersecurity arm of the Canadian government. So I tend to be on the other side of the phone call with businesses when something goes bad. The reality is, absolutely, the partnership with business is key, and it will feature prominently in the new cybersecurity strategy. So the first cybersecurity strategy was in 2018. There was 2 big deliverables out of it. One is the creation of the Cyber Center, the one I have the privilege of leading. So it's been 5 years, roughly, since that Cyber Center was created. And another one was the creation of the National Cybercrime Coordination Center, which is headed by the Federal Police, the RCMP. There was a condition in that National Cybersecurity Strategy that at the midpoint, that there be a study to do, are we on track? And that midpoint refresh, it was a 5-year action plan, and the midpoint refresh was to say, are we funding the right initiatives? And I think by and large, everything was going on track, but there's been 3 areas that have been highlighted as needing a boost, which led to the development now of the new cybersecurity strategy. So one being the accelerated digitization of Canadian fabric of Canadian society, partly because of the pandemic. Also, suddenly everything is online. The second one is the sophistication of the actors that we're seeing, the sophistication of the incidents that we're seeing, and thirdly, the skill shortage that we are living. We're not alone to live that, like many of you. So we're currently in the development of the new one. We hope it will be out this year. There's been considerable consultation with government stakeholder, with the provinces in Canada, with businesses, academia, and citizenry. We've heard a lot. Number one was partnership and information sharing. So we have to do a better job at that. Obviously, invest heavily in skill development, but also that partnership is with businesses. That partnership is also with international partners. We live it day in and day out through the 5 Eyes. We live it day in and day out through some of the joint publications that we put out with CISA and our UK and other international partners. That carries a lot of weight domestically. So that will continue to be featured in our new cybersecurity strategy. There'll be 3 pillars. So obviously, it's still before government, so the details have to be kept a little bit in confidence. But the three pillars. The first one is about partnership. The second pillar is about a whole of society approach, and the third one is about to detect and deter cyber threat. And the word deter is put there with a purpose. So this is what it's going to come out of it. That will be translated operationally into what the Cyber Center does. So we will continue to protect government and systems of importance, critical infrastructure. Very proud of the work that we've done protecting government and how we expand that. So we are I would say, the geeks that like to develop capabilities. To be the trusted partner for information sharing, for advice and guidance, for cyber flashes. So that's the inform and then empowering by that joint partnership. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas. So partnering with the private sector, bringing their ideas to join forces with us so that we can develop capabilities that keep up with the challenges that we face.
Thanks, Sami, and we'll be on the lookout for the details in that new strategy then. I now turn to the audience to see if there are any questions from anyone in the room. If not, oh, thank you. Could you just briefly ask a question and then who it's addressed to, or if it's to all the panelists?
Thank you. It's to all the panelists. I'm Sebastian Garneau, and I would like to better understand how you organize the information sharing in the context of antitrust law. And also, there is sometimes good guys or great guys, they have very relevant information, but if they give it to the law enforcement or to the national authority, then they're gonna get in trouble. So how are you looking at these two topics? First, antitrust. Second, law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody volunteering to take that? Sami.
I'll volunteer. The first thing I say is we are not a law enforcement and we're not the regulator. So they can share with us anything they want to share. We are part of a cryptologic agency, so we know how to keep a secret. And as a result, that is kept in confidence, whatever is shared, and then anonymized as a way to share more publicly with the rest.
Any other reactions? No? Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Wolfgang Kleinwächter. I'm a retired professor. And you all stressed the need for international cooperation, but nobody mentioned the United Nations. Do you see any opportunity that the United Nations could become active? Just recently, the Cybercrime Convention failed. Is a bad treaty better than, or is no treaty better than a bad treaty? Thank you.
Thank you. Jake.
Thanks for that. So I think one of the things that we've been really thinking about a lot lately is the UN certainly is one vehicle or one platform for that, but just engagement in general in the multiple different platforms there are for cyber dialogues is really important. I think there's been uneven engagement, often from the West in a lot of these organizations, and I think we're committed to really stepping that up at the UN, but also elsewhere. Because if we don't engage, then we can't affect the outcome. Thanks.
Katherine, you.
Yes, I think the UN will play a critical role. I sat on the United Nations group of governmental experts for 7 years, and I think what I learned there was that even if a process doesn't succeed, the discussions live in the delegations who have participated in those discussions, and that information percolates back to the national and regional level. And yes, the UN has been encouraging the regional processes, and especially in Africa, a lot of that is now happening at the regions. So the UN has been a catalyst. It is very, very difficult to negotiate agreements, but even where there's no agreement, I think there's learning and there's progress that takes place.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. If you make it very short, yes, please.
Thank you. Christine Bejarasco, CISO from WithSecure. And a question primarily to Mr. Jake Braun. So essentially, post-SolarWinds SEC requirements to CISOs in the United States, I was sort of just wondering, with the increased liability now, both personal and professional for CISOs, has there been any thoughts, especially when it comes to capacity building and then the need for more senior cybersecurity executives, on what can also be done to support these executives? Because on the other hand, they have more liabilities on their side now.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. So yes, I mean, we're, as I mentioned earlier, doing a lot of capacity building in different parts of the world. I think that we actually just did an inventory of all the U.S. government-funded trainings that are out there for different folks, and a lot of that does include executive training and so on. And we're trying to figure out how we can increase that going forward.
Thanks. Okay, you have 10 seconds before we hit the red mark.
10 seconds. We're also experimenting in France with training for executives as part of the major administrations, public administrations. This experiment is ongoing, and happy to report next time we meet.
This is a very stressful device. With 14 seconds to spare, join me in thanking and applauding our speakers. Thank you very much.